So hi everyone, thanks again for joining us today, and thank you Elizabeth for speaking. It's great to have you. So Elizabeth Long is a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She's an active advocate of immigrant and refugee rights in Canada and frequently presents and advises on immigration issues to organizations, universities, members of parliament, unions, and the media. She's also testified several times before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on various immigration policies. Elizabeth holds a Juris Doctor law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in psychology from Memorial University of Newfoundland. She also holds a Master of Law degree from Osgoode Hall Law School in York University, where she focuses on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law for foreign workers. Thanks again for joining us today, Elizabeth, and good luck with the presentation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to come and speak with you guys. So let me just share my slides right now. So I don't know if any of you had come to the previous webinar that we did with Toronto Jobs. In the previous webinar, we talked about open work permits. And today, this is sort of a continuation on the open work, what we were talking about before. And we're going to talk about non-LMA work permits. The reason why I thought this topic might be of interest to a lot of you is because work permits in Canada, they're not all, let's say, the same ease in getting the work permits. People, often ask me, oh, how can I get a work permit? The question is not how can you, but can you? Do you qualify for a work permit? So I'm just showing you guys this chart. And really, we have several kinds of ways in which we're going to separate the different categories of work permits. So the first one we have is an open work permit, which we covered in the last one. I'm going to touch on this a little bit. And the employer-specific work permits. Each of these categories, it depends on your circumstances as to whether or not you can get the work permit or not. In the employer-specific work permit, where you can only work for the person for the employer specified on your work permit, it's divided into two separate categories. The LMIA is the one that is the most known, the Labor Market Impact Assessment. That is the one where the employer, they normally have to show that they cannot find a Canadian who is able and willing to do the job. It goes through the Labor Department. There are subsets of the LMIA, for example, the global talent stream, where although recruitment is not emphasized in there, the employer would still have to provide labor market benefits. So it is it's quite onerous on the employer to have to go through an LMIA. What we're going to concentrate on today is the IMP, the International Mobility Program. And that is the category of work permits where the employer is exempt from applying for the LMIA. There are, as you can see, quite a lot of different categories under the IMP. We're going to cover three of the ones that are more commonly used. Every person is different, and there are many different categories for that. But we're going to cover three of them. We're going to cover the intercompany transferee category. We're going to cover free trade, the free trade agreements, and there's a subset of that, which is the professional category. And we're going to cover francophone categories. Okay, why am I talking about IMP? Because when we're looking at how to apply for a work permit, we're always trying to find the easiest way to do so. We're always trying to find what is the easier way to get a work permit. And a lot of employers, they default to the LMIA. They're thinking, oh my goodness, it's going to be so difficult for me to have to go through the LMIA to get someone to work for me. There are, however, ways to get a work permit without going through LMIA. That's where we're going to talk about this. The open work permits, yes, those are fantastic because you can work for anyone that you want in Canada. but you have to qualify for that. Okay, so first let me just quickly touch upon the open work permits. The open work permits, here are some of the ones that are out there. The post-grad work permits are for students. If you've undergone a program in Canada that is from a public university or college, and if it's under the 2 years, you only get the length of time of the period. So if you get a 1-year program, you get a 1-year work permit. 2-year work program, however, you'll get a 3-year open work permit. And this is something that is fantastic for students. However, the postgrad work permit is not normally able to be renewed. So if you've done your postgrad work permit and you want to get another work permit, that may or may not be possible. You have to qualify for another work permit. The spousal work permit is something where if you have a spouse who has a work permit, and normally it's the employer-specific work permit. If you have a post-grad work permit and you have a high-skilled job offer, your spouse can also get a spousal work permit as well. Also, spouses of students who are going to school in Canada can also get spousal work permits. The working holiday work permit is for young people who qualify, and normally there's a lottery, and you have to be national of certain countries who have these agreements, and you can get an open working holiday work permit. There is a special work permit now for Hong Kong residents. If you have obtained a degree or a diploma within the last 5 years, anywhere in the world, you could get a open work permit under that category. Bridging work permits are for people who have applied for permanent residence and who have been accepted to a certain level. For example, and you currently hold a work permit. So if you don't have a work permit, you won't qualify for this. But if you currently hold a work permit and it's going to expire within 4 months, and you have gotten your permanent residence to a certain stage, then you could possibly get your bridging work permit. Okay, so let's move on to employer-specific work permits. Employer-specific work permits, one of the key things that you have to have is you need to have a job offer from an employer, right? So that employer is going to be stated on your work permit, and you're going to only be able to work for that specific employer. And most of the time, it will also specify your position as well. And there will be registrations of where you work, how you, your duties and your salary as well. So the first one, like we said, there's the LMIA. The normal one is the employer needs to try to recruit Canadians and show they can find another Canadian for the position. There is one called the Global Talent Stream, and that's mostly for tech workers. There's another category where if your company is an innovative company, you may also be able to hire specialized workers as well who are not tech workers. But in this one, the employer has to provide a labor market benefit plan where they have to show that they're going to benefit the labor market in 3 different ways as well. The International Mobility Program is the one that we're really going to focus on today. You have to fit within the specified criteria of the program, okay? So we're going to talk about 3 programs that I think are quite useful for people who might think about coming to Canada. So the first one, so let me talk a little bit more about the IMP. It's LMIA exempt. The employer does not have to undergo recruitment of Canadians. That is a very, very key thing that is very advantageous for employers. Instead of going through an LMIA application, the employer can file an offer of employment registration with the government. You just go through the portal and you just file it. It's an automatic thing that you can do The reason for doing so is whatever you register as to the conditions of the employment, including the salary, the location, the benefits, and the duties, you have to adhere to, okay? As in the LMIA, your spouses can obtain. Spouse is not only people you're married to; it's also common law. So someone who you have lived with in a conjugal relationship for at least 1 year. That's they're counted as common law, and they can obtain open work permits. And your children can also get study permits and study in grade school as well. Okay. All right. So the first category I'd like to speak about is the intracompany transferee category. And this is the category where if you have a overseas company, so a company that's located outside of Canada, and you're an employee of that company, and you need to be transferred to work in a related Canadian company. When I say a related Canadian company, I'm looking at majority ownership. So you can be a parent subsidiary company where there's at least 51% ownership. You could be sister companies where both of you are owned by a parent, that kind of relationship, okay? And you're transferred to the Canadian company. If you've worked there for at least a year and you've been working in the senior or executive management, or if you have specialized knowledge, you can transfer to come to Canada, and we just basically file the work permit directly without going through LMIA. If you're from a visa-exempt country, we could have you just apply at the airport for the work permit, especially after the borders open in September and you've been vaccinated. You could just come to the airport and file your work permit there and get your work permit right away. If you're from a visa-requiring country, then we can file it directly at the visa post. And these applications often take, the standard processing time is supposed to be 2 weeks to process, okay? Now, the positions do have to be substantially similar. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it does have to be substantially similar. So, if you were a manager outside of the country and you're a manager here, that's okay. If it's completely different, for example, you were managing HR, and then now you want to be a software worker. That's not the same, right? So that could be an issue. We want to be transferring you from a similar position overseas to a similar position in Canada. Also, this can be used not only for established companies in Canada. It could also be used a lot of time for people who want to do a startup in Canada. So the company in Canada is brand new, and we're transferring the employees from overseas to Canada. That can be done as well. It doesn't have to be a company that has been established for a long time in Canada, okay? And sometimes even for entrepreneurs, say you have a company overseas and you want to transfer yourself to Canada, we can do that as well. The second one is free trade professionals. So this applies to people who are nationals of certain countries. And sometimes when you're an HR of a company, it really helps to see where it is that it would be useful to recruit from. So if you are recruiting a national from countries where Canada has a free trade agreement, and I've listed the countries over here: US, Mexico, Chile, Peru, Colombia, EU, UK, Panama, South Korea, Japan, Australia. Depending on the profession, every free trade agreement has their own list of occupations, but many professionals, for example, engineers, computer systems analysts, it depends on what the agreement is, but many professionals can be transferred to Canada. So even if you're a brand new employee, right? And let's say I'm a brand new employee from Mexico, and the company in Canada needs me to work for them. as a software engineer. I can just prepare an application for you to apply at the airport. And that's all that we need to do, right? So it's something that a lot of employers, when you're thinking about hiring for a worker, you might be scared and think, oh my goodness, it's going to take months and months and months for us to get a possible approval, have to recruit Canadians, etc. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. If you are recruiting someone who is from a free trade agreement country, then, and the occupation is right, then we can possibly get them a work permit quite fast and easy, okay? But it will depend on where they're from and what exactly the free trade agreement covers. The third one that is a very nice work permit is for those people who are French speakers. So if you are a francophone, so the definition is someone who habitually uses French as their language. So if you're born and raised in a French-speaking country, right, and this is obvious that you're a francophone, then we can. So then you should qualify. If you are not born and raised in a French-speaking country, but you can actually, you're fluent in French, then you can go and do an exam. And if you get a level of CLB 7, which is enough that you can, for example, go and take a university class and be okay to do that, then you can also qualify for this. Now, as long as you have a job offer outside of Quebec, right? This program, the intention is for Canada to attract francophones to places outside of Quebec. So if you have a job offer outside of Quebec, and the position is a high skilled position. So in Canada, we have different occupation codes for different occupations, and O, A, and B are high skilled, and C and D are low skilled. So if you have a high skilled position anywhere outside of Quebec, we can get you a work permit just like that. That's all that's required. The job itself does not have to require you to speak French. It just has to be outside of Quebec and be high skilled, as long as you yourself are what's deemed a francophone. Okay, so these are three very nice work permits that a lot of people may qualify for, and you don't even know that you qualify for it. So, what are the next steps? If you want to come to Canada, you want to work in Canada, what are the next steps? The first thing is you really must have a plan as to what you need to do for your immigration goals. Some of these, what I'm telling you today is just general advice. It's something that may apply to you, it may not. What we recommend that you do is you can come to us, you can go to another lawyer, go to an expert that is an expert in this area of law, and get some advice on your plan, okay? Once you have your plan, then you have to actually be willing to carry it out. It seems obvious, but it's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. Immigrating to Canada is certainly not for the faint of heart. It may be doable, but it depends on you and as to whether or not you're willing to do what is needed. Depending on your circumstances, oftentimes applying for a work permit in Canada or applying for a job in Canada, and the employer is asking you, well, can you work for me? And you say, well, I don't have a work permit yet. That might be the end of the conversation for a lot of people. Sometimes, though, if the employer is willing to hear you out, and for example, say it's actually very easy for us to get a work permit for you. Say you're a software worker from Mexico, and they're looking for someone, and let's say you could get a work permit in a few weeks' time by just applying at the airport, right? If the officer or if the employer doesn't understand this, they may not be willing to carry out. But if they're willing to, and this is for employers as well, if you're an employer and you're willing to think about hiring outside of the country because you just can't find the talent that you need inside the country, you need to understand that there are sometimes very easier, it's not completely, no work, but it's actually, it might be easier than you think to hire certain people, okay? Something that's really important that I wanted to emphasize, because I get a lot of questions and where people say, oh, so can you find me a job, right? Can you get me an LMIA? Those kind of questions lead me to think that they've been speaking to a lot of the fraudsters out there who are saying, buy a job offer, give me money and I will get you a job offer. Those are fake. First of all, employers in Canada normally will not just go and offer, I don't know any employer in their right mind would just offer a job to someone without ever having met them and go through the entire thing without, really wanting to hire somebody, without actually, speaking with them, interviewing them, and making sure that they can hire that person, and they don't, they can't find a Canadian, or it's someone that they really need, right? So if you're just paying someone to get you a job, 99.99% of the time that will be fake. And it's illegal for recruiters to charge fees for the workers. Usually they can charge fees to the employer, but not workers, especially in most provinces in Canada, okay? So make sure that when you're getting involved in this, you're not putting yourself into a situation where you're going to misrepresent the nature of your job. If your job offer is fake, that's fraud. If you're saying that you have a job offer and the job offer is fake, you put yourself into a situation of misrepresentation that you will likely be very difficult to get back onto the right track. When you are in Canada, make sure you stay in status. If you are out of status, this could mean a lot of trouble for you in order to immigrate and stay legally in the end. So it goes back to point one, have a plan, and then you also need to make sure that you're able to stay on the right track. If an application is rejected, you must contact a lawyer, not a consultant, a lawyer right away, okay? There are filing deadlines with the federal court that you have to know. If your decision was made outside of Canada, you have 60 days from the date of your decision. If your decision is made inside Canada, you only have 15 days, okay? And so this is something that if you want to preserve your right, it may be a good case, it may not be a good case, but at least you need to know, okay? You have to contact a lawyer right away. Otherwise, if you're filing outside of those deadlines, it may very well be too late. Sometimes you may not need to go to court. Sometimes you can ask for reconsideration. But just because you say, okay, well, I'm going to call the call center and ask them what to do, and the officer says, oh, you can just write a letter and send it in, right? The call center in immigration is not necessarily, the same as Amazon, okay? They're not necessarily on your side. They're there for the immigration to try to, have integrity in the immigration system, but they're not necessarily there to represent you. And they give the advice that may be to your own detriment a lot of times. So if you're just going to go and submit a letter, you don't really know what exactly you're talking about. You don't know what area of law applies to you and what regulations apply. You just write a letter and it's rejected, and then you go to a lawyer. I've had people do that, and they come to me and they say, can you now submit a reconsideration? Can you now write a letter? I said, well, it's now too late, because the immigration, normally they only look at one reconsideration. And if you've already submitted a letter, that's already one kick at the can. They're not going to let you have a second kick at the can, right? So if I'm going to write in now explaining your situation, they're just not even going to consider my reconsideration most of the time, okay? So if you have a rejection, please don't try to resolve it just by yourself. Seek an expert. Hopefully, you would have sought the advice of an expert even from step one before you even file the application, especially with work permits, which are very, very complicated areas of law that you would have found a lawyer to help you. All right, so this is my information. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. Let me know that you've come to this webinar, and we will be giving you a webinar discount as well. I've also included a link here to sign up for a newsletter as well. We send out, because the immigration laws change so much. What I tell you today is true today, but it very well could change in the next few weeks or next month or by next year. So the only way we're really able to update people after webinars like this on important changes to law is through our newsletter that we send out whenever some news, important news comes out. Hey guys, that's it for me today. Oops. Alex, are you there? Okay, I think that's it, unless any of you have any questions. Thank you so much for attending, and all the best with your job hunt and your immigration.